Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to BeamNG. And while we've finished with Phompsonby, there is another. And I say another, it's another brand. It's kind of the brand that I put all of the things that I feel aren't good enough for Phompsonby, or that I don't want to sort of associate with Phompsonby. They all go into this brand. And this brand is Watkins Co. So there's their they don't have a badge. They have lettering, but they don't have a badge. Instead, what they have is this W plus C, because it's Watkins Company. And this is their bonnet ornament, and to shorten down the name, it will sometimes just say Watkins on the back or on the front. But either way, this is kind of the other brand I have that just sort of things that I don't want to have Phompsonby branding on. So this is meant to be a sort of rival company. They sort of have evolved into the rival company of Phompsonby. Whatever Phompsonby's doing, Watkins is sort of their main rival. So what we have here is one of the earliest models of Watkins vehicles, where Phompsonby sort of catered for partly the luxury, but also partly the more everyday affordable vehicle during the 10s, 20s and 30s. Watkins was sort of going all out luxury, so this is the Royale, and it's very much meant to be a sort of be a competitor to the family. So yeah, very similar sort of setup, very similar sort of engine as an inline 3. It's not particularly fast. Meant to be for that sort of 10s era. As you can see, we're getting very high up in the revs there. We're going to get to a similar sort of speed as the family, and indeed it's a very similar sort of style to the family. There's our driver's view, which isn't looking particularly well there, but 75 miles an hour, perfectly too high. But yeah, this is kind of the Watkins colour, by the way, as well. This is sort of Watkins dark red, where Phompsonby shifts into a sort of Phompsonby racing green. This is a sort of Watkins dark red. It's kind of what I decided their signature colour is going to be, because I just like this sort of dark burgundy red sort of type colour. But yeah, so this is sort of like meant to be the competitor to the family. And we also have got another vehicle from the era, which is the Magnificence. So yeah, we are going to be going through all of Watkins' vehicles, by the way, because as you saw, there's not actually all that many, and I can probably get through most of them here. But yeah, so the Magnificence is meant to be a very similar sort of state wagon. Very expensive, decadent luxury, as was Watkins' sort of aim at the time, sort of focusing on the high upper class, the expensive branding. They're meant to be a very prestigious brand. Think sort of Rolls-Royce or Bentley, but for the 10s and 20s. That's what Watkins was meant to be. So it's not as fast, but it is far more luxurious. Yeah, you've got your covered top, you've got more stowage at the back. It's got a similar sort of engine size and everything in there. So yeah, that's what these cars were meant to be for Watkins. 10s and 20s. This is sort of what they were going with. They did take up some racing as well. Obviously, the history of Watkins is going to be far more spotty than it is for Phompsonby. But yeah, so this is sort of like their competitor to the Power Max. So here you go. If we get ourselves into a sort of driving position, this is sort of what was the competitor to the Power Max. So as you can hear, it's got a very different engine to the Power Max, but again, very, very similar. Very similar idea to the Power Max. Less power, which means it's more stable, more easy to control. If we can get ourselves onto the bank track, you'll see. I do quite like the design of this thing. The red line. We got our spare wheel up there just because, why not? Ooh, nearly went too hard on the bank in there, but we go. And they, of course, have got the number 18 for their race car. So yeah, it's a little bit more stable than the Power Max. Definitely easier to control, but it's also not as fast. As you can see, we're only going 114. Power Max was going a bit faster than this, I do believe. But it's more screamy, but perhaps lower decibels than the Power Max. Definitely nicer to drive than the Power Max. But yeah, so this is just sort of like their competitor racer to the Power Max. And they do also have another race car as well, which is the, where is it? Overdrive. There it is. So yeah, the Overdrive was meant to be their sort of 30s-ish racing car. If I hadn't if I had actually hidden the automation chassis properly, then that wouldn't be there. But both of them, they've got the external supercharger tagged onto the front. Relative chase. Okay, but yeah, so less of a. Okay, we're gonna have to dodge. Whew, okay, that was dangerous. So yeah, less of a bank track racer, perhaps, more of a sort of flat racer. Although it does do perfectly fine on the banking as well, obviously, but the style just isn't quite the same as banked track racers. It's also got, you know, a two-seat configuration and things where the single-seater bank track racers didn't quite have that. But you know, this is their sort of 30s racer that I made just to sort of try out this style. I didn't want to put it onto Phompsonby because Phompsonby already had their racing team sorted out. So yeah, this is why Watkins sort of got this 137, which isn't as fast as I think the Phoenix. Might be faster than the Green Arrow or the same. Can't quite remember. But yeah, engine is an inline engine as opposed to anything else. But yeah, so that is their race cars, and the only race cars I have, actually, I do believe. If we move up, we have got sort of early post-war in the form of the Deliverer. This is either a 30s or a 40s. I think this is actually a 30s vehicle that they made during the Big Sad. So where Phompsonby was struggling, Watkins perhaps struggled slightly less, and you know, the Deliverer was perfectly fine. It was fine. People needed vans at that point. They sort of had to splash out on vans, and so Watkins with their van did perfectly fine. Yeah, obviously they had to make cutbacks and everything to deal with the Big Sad. You know, very relatively small engine in here. Still goes at decent speed, 95-ish miles an hour, which, you know, it's a van. It's not meant to be a particularly high-speed vehicle. So yeah, it's a perfectly fine van. I like the colour. Yeah, meant to be as your sort of 30s van. We still have the W and C on the front as well as the bonnet ornament. No Watkins logoing or anything on the back. But you know, perfectly fine and adequate van. Talking of, a box van came during the 40s or 50s. I can't remember what era this was designated as. I have a feeling it might be 40s, but either way, into the 40s and 50s, this is sort of another vehicle for Watkins. So very much a sort of Duracell battery colour in colour scheme, but I thought, you know, a two-tone sounds pretty fun, pretty funky. So yeah, W and C on the front. Obviously, we have got the bonnet ornament. All the bits and bobs you might need. Perfectly fine, decent van, sold nicely. Sold nicely because, you know, who doesn't need a box van like this? It's perfectly fine for most businesses, whether you're delivering bread or doing plumbing or perhaps crashing your van. Oh, the engine's broken. Oh. But yeah, so that's just a nice, decent van. Perfectly adequate for whatever you might need van-wise. And into the 50s, Phompsonby was obviously undergoing their whole reshuffle, and so with the 50s came the Phompsonby Atelier, and that meant that Watkins had to clap back, and Watkins came back with this, which is the Reef, because Phompsonby had the Atelier, Atoll, you know, a sort of water theme with that naming, so Watkins sort of capitalised on that, and they came up with the Reef, which is a very similar looking car. If I was to perhaps get the Atelier next to it, and we can compare how they look. There it is. Spawn new. Here we go. So as you can see, very similar sort of looking cars. They've got slightly different Slightly different grills, slightly different bumpers, different placement for various bits and pieces. Watkins has, of course, got the lower sort of fog lamps as well on there, but from the rear they're looking very similar as well. Very similar sort of looking idea. And yeah, you can tell me which of these two you prefer the look of. Yeah, perhaps we'll do some testing in the future to you know, test their off-roading capabilities or whatever. If you guys would like to see sort of, you know, competitions between base game and my stuff, or two of my stuff, for example, then let me know, and you know, when I next can, I'll try and do something like that for you guys. But yeah, so the Reef was meant to be the competitor to the Atolia. It's got an inline 4, I think, engine in there by the looks of it, yeah. So yeah, very similar idea, you know, sedan. It's in this nice darkish blue sort of colour, very sort of similar chromy sort of wheels. And yeah, it's just a very nice sort of sedan type vehicle. I quite like it. You know, you guys let me know if you like it as well. And this is also the first instance I have, at least the earliest instance so far, of the W and C being replaced by just Watkins being written on the front there. Ooh, and off we go. And down. Ooh. You're perhaps not living that. Oh, and the wheels are off the ground. Oh, well, the engine still works. But anyway, so yeah, that's the Reef. The Reef meant to be the competitor to the Atolia. How do I remove car? Delete. No, never mind. We're just going to have the Atolia out. So not going to bother worrying about that. Instead, we're going to be moving on. So much like Phompsonby, I haven't actually made much in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s sort of era, which means we're not going to have as many stuff sort of from there. So we're going to be moving instead into the sort of 2000s with Watkins in the millennia, because I do actually have quite a few things like that, such as this 2000 Millennium Bug little vehicle, designed to be a little cheap car. You know, it doesn't look particularly nice. It doesn't have a particularly big engine under there. If we have a look, there it is, little inline 3 engine. Yeah, front wheel drive, pretty high revving, which means it's got some modicum perhaps of drivability and you know, fun and acceleration and whatnot. But yeah, it's really not a particularly fast car, not particularly much of anything. It's just it's just kind of a really cheap car that we did a challenge with my friend where we tried to make cheap, crappy cars in automation, and well, this is what came out. And I didn't put it under Phompsonby for good reason, because it's a Watkins brand vehicle. It doesn't even have the any sort of branding or anything on it. Not even a Watkins. Doesn't have a bonnet scoop. Bonnet ornament or anything. But you know, it's a cheap little car. Yeah, you'd probably get one of these for 200 quid used for your first car when you first pass your driving test, something like that. It's, yeah, a little crappy car that has, you know, some acceleration and performance, but not all too much. And yeah, just meant for the cheap consumer who might need a car in a hurry to take themselves and one or two other people. So that's the base. Nothing too outrageous or crazy with that. We then have got something like the Chirp. We'll leave the Wedge for now. So the Chirp is meant to be a sort of cheap little off-roader. So yeah, engine designed for torque, little V6 engine in there. We obviously have got a turbo. Yeah, it is meant for off-roading, so it's got, you know, sort of tow bar, off-road tyres, off-road suspension, off-road wheels, sorts of things. Relatively cheap SUV, because Watkins left the decadence of their early roots behind and have sort of transferred into more sort of cheaper consumer cars. So yeah, this is meant to be a sort of little cheap little cheap and cheerful off-roader, which is what we have here. Although it does get up to a decent speed because it's a V6 and, you know, tuned for power. 6-speed gearbox. You know, let's take it off the edge here. Oh, come on, land it, land it, land it, land it. That was pretty good. Oh, it's rolling. But we landed it pretty well on those wheels. The wheels we had before one of the front ones. There it goes. There it goes. So yeah, it's a sort of cheap, a cheap off-roading vehicle. Nothing too spectacular or crazy, but it does at least have the bonnet ornament this time. I made sure to remember to put that on apparently when making this vehicle. But yeah, so that is the chap. Nothing too spectacular or crazy with it. Just a cheaper off-roader to something like Phompsonby's Explorer, for example. We've then got the Provisor. You know, who doesn't love a Provisor? So the Provisor and the Fontaine are very similar kind of sedan cars, question mark. This one is in a sort of bluish colour. I can't remember any of the stats of these, so you will have to bear with me. But it does have a V6 twin turbo in there because, you know, who doesn't love that? It's got a nice automatic gearbox. No Watkins writing on it, but it does have the bonnet ornament, obviously. You know, we've got to have something like that in. Oh, bit of lag, twin exhausts, and you know, it's going pretty well for an automatic gearbox machine. Off it goes. Looks-wise, as we bounce around everywhere, looks-wise, I'm not sure. One of the reasons why I don't build in the more modern eras is because I just can't do sort of modern design looking things. As you can see with this, as you've seen with Phompsonby vehicles in some of the last episodes of Phompsonby, and the Fontaine is very much a similar sort of deal. So yeah, as you can see, perhaps not the greatest of looking vehicles at the front, or at the rear, as you can see. Sort of everything's very much squished around here. Probably should have, you know, moved that down, done something with these. Yeah, it's not the greatest of looking vehicles. We do at least have the bonnet ornament, and it does have a top. I always forget to put in like sunroofs and things, but the Fontaine does at least have a sunroof. And you know, driving wise, it's perfectly fine. I think it's a inline 5 or inline 6, no turbo, so naturally aspirated. Relatively cheap as a result, I would imagine. Sort of design, and well, looking at the looks, you can see why it's particularly might be a cheap design vehicle. Oh, that was just a glancing blow. That's not what I meant to do. Off we go again into this block. There you go. Probably looks better than it did. Oh, we still drive though. Technically. Spin. There you go. Look at that. Still drives. Still drives by a technicality. But yeah, so that's the Fontaine. Not exactly the greatest looking vehicles. Definitely not one of my best. Definitely not one of my best designs. I will give you that much. The Rever is one of the things I'll be one of the final things. So the Rever was an attempt to see how high you could get an engine to rev, because high rev means high power and high acceleration, and well, it certainly does. Certainly does do that. It's not meant to be a sort of serious design, as you can tell from our speed. It's not meant to be a particularly serious law design. Oh, we threaded the needle. Oh, we're off at 300 miles an hour. We've turned into a spaceship. Yeah, it's not meant to be a serious design choice. Much like the Mark series, the hypercar, stuff like that for Phompsonby. This isn't meant to be a serious law-worthy design. This was just a sort of fun little thing that I tried out. Has this actually got quad turbos? Or is this... no, it's just got two massive ones. Okay. But yeah, it's not meant to be a serious design to fit in with the law, be law accurate. Yeah, it's just meant to be a sort of... It's a bit of fun with automation. And as you can see, it does go pretty fast, pretty quickly, with a very high revving engine. Very screamy. Perhaps a more serious design would be the wedge, and it's probably going to be sort of like the last serious design you're going to see. But yeah, so the wedge is well, it's kind of capitalising on the idea of the PLP50. So it's got a very small engine. I believe this is like a 1 litre or less, maybe 800 cc. So a 0.8 litre inline 3 mounted transversely under there. Beam and automation don't particularly like this body, as you can see from the fact that this rear light is not meant to be doing that. But yeah, it's meant to be a sort of micro car. Perhaps a more serious design than any of the others. Couple of little pop-up headlights, and yeah, Beam does not like the body shape. It's not particularly fast as a car. It's not particularly big as a car either. But you know, we survived that. And if we can survive that sort of crash, we can survive any. It's actually stopped the light from bouncing around, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so this is the wedge. It's very much a wedge. I could have made it yellow, like a piece of cheese, but I thought that'd be too cheesy. So yeah, this is the wedge. It's just a fun little thing, and of course, when you're designing a very small car like that, you think, how big of an engine can I get? And well, I wanted to know that too. I wanted to know just how big of an engine you could get into these things, so that's what I've got with these two vehicles you're about to see. So this is one of them, the Hypersonic, and I think the Supersonic is probably named the other one. Yeah, Supersonic, Hypersonic. Very similar cars. Using two different engine types. I think this is like a V12, I think, in there. Yeah, I think that's a V12. Well, we can count the number of exhausts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so it's a V12. I put an exhaust for each one. There's this fake roll bar, which unfortunately doesn't work, and it still does that. I thought that by adding these, they would come out as actually being, you know, a functioning roll bar, but they weren't. So yeah, it's a very much a car with a stupid engine, stupid horsepower, and I'm on keyboard and mouse for all of these, so I can't actually do a slow throttle to accelerate. It's either all or nothing, which means this is what we're getting. Yeah, there you go. If the roll bar actually worked, perhaps we could see how fast this thing can go, but unfortunately the roll bar does not work. And yeah, they're not meant to be serious designs, either of these things. Massive spoiler, massive front splitter, the funny number, lots of exhausts. Same with the Supersonic. I think the Supersonic is actually might be more stable, I believe, as opposed to the Hypersonic, whose rear lights are being obscured by the exhaust. So yeah, I think this might actually be a more stable design. Another, I think, V12 twin turbo. By the looks, yeah, it's not quad. We have of course got the fake supercharger and blower from one of the mods that I found on the Steam Workshop. We've seen it before on other cars such as the Phompsonby Hot Rod. But yeah, so this one, as you can see, a bit more stable than the Hypersonic. It's also got far more extravagant exhausts. We've got the white walling, because who doesn't like white walling? We've got the other funny number as opposed to the Hypersonic's original funny number. And technically, both of them are road legal cars. You know, they both have got number plates. They've all got indicators and side mirrors, and technically it's a road legal vehicle. Not sure if you'd want to take it on the road though, considering its driving performance. But it's just a bit of fun with automation, trying to stick massive engines into. Oh dear, these car chassis. What's got on here? What is this? Oh no! Oh dear. Oh. That's not gone well. What is? I think that's the splitter. Yeah, I think that's the splitter that's done this. Yeah, because there's interesting. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that, and we'll move on to some of the last vehicles that you're going to be seeing here for Watkins. Like I said, there's not all too many of them here. We've sort of gone through most of them, if not all of them. Not quite. We do, of course, have the hyperdrive, which is kind of it's meant to be sort of Watkins' attempt at getting into the sort of hypercar craze that Phompsonby has got themselves into. So yeah, this has got a twin turbo V12, I think, in there. And yeah, a very sleek design again, obviously. Big wing, big front splitter, sort of everything you could possibly need for a hypercar. And yeah, it's rather wide, but it's designed for speed. We've got some interesting wheel choices, but it's not actually all too fast in terms of speed. It doesn't help that I have got it on, I think this is a sequential gearbox or something along those lines. So yeah, it doesn't help that I'm not actually controlling the gears here, but yeah, as you can see, it's not actually all too fast in comparison to something like the Marks or the Hypercar, something like that. I mean, it's fast, but yeah, it's definitely not quite as fast as something like the Mark, even the Mark 2.5 from Phompsonby. It's a fine-looking car. Bonk. I think it's a fine-looking car, but yeah, it's not exactly the Mark toppler that Watkins hoped it would be. And that means the final vehicle I'm going to be showing here is this thing, a massive behemoth. It weighed something like 3 tons when I made it in automation. It's got white walling. It's got a massive front end. Obviously got the W and C. We have got the bonnet ornament, and it's got a V12 engine, I think, in there with twin turbos. So yeah, it's a massive land boat with too much power, as you can tell from the fact that it's currently beating the hyperdrive in terms of everything to do with power and speed, especially splatting into a wall. But yeah, so that is it for Watkins. Yeah, this is everything I have to show you. There might be more designs, but if there are, they're lost to time, or I haven't exported them yet. Either one of the two, really. But yeah, so that will be it for this episode. And like I say in previous episodes, if there's a desire for it, if people are asking for it, I will make a Google Drive and put the zip files for these vehicles in there, and you can download them and play around with them at your leisure. And eventually I might even upload them to the Beam repository. But yeah, also, as I said in this episode, if you wanted to see, comparative performances between, something from Phompsonby and something from Watkins, such as the Reef and the Italia, or any other ones, or even a base BeamNG car versus a Phompsonby or a Watkins car, let me know, and I can do that. But yeah, so that is it for Watkins, the main rival, quote-unquote, of Phompsonby, aka my rubbish basket for all cars and stuff that I make that I don't want to put under the Phompsonby naming, because I'm just not confident in how they'll turn out or anything like that. But yeah, so that is it. I will thank you all for watching, and goodbye.